Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves whisked away to a city shimmering under a scorching desert sun. Imagine bustling marketplaces overflowing with silks and spices, the air thick with the scent of dates and frankincense. Picture towering minarets piercing the cerulean sky, their echoes bouncing off grand libraries and bustling workshops. This isn't some sleepy oasis, this is 9th century Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. A place where scholars debated the cosmos and artisans crafted wonders, a melting pot of innovation where, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a week without contracting some exotic ailment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time, it's always cool to see where in the world you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the caravan after weeks of relentless travel, dust clinging to your robes and a profound thirst baking your throat. The sheer scale of Baghdad is overwhelming. It sprawls before you, a circular city enclosed by massive walls punctuated with imposing gates. You trudge through the Bab al-Sham, the Syrian gate, the sounds of the city washing over you like a tidal wave, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the melodic calls of vendors hawking their wares, the boisterous chatter of countless souls speaking languages you barely recognize. Finding your bearings in this labyrinth is a challenge. You quickly realize that the city is meticulously planned, a testament to the Abbasid caliph's vision. Straight avenues intersect at right angles, a stark contrast to the winding alleyways of other cities. But don't let the grid fool you, getting lost is still remarkably easy. You navigate through the throngs of people, a kaleidoscope of colors and cultures. Persians, Egyptians, Indians, even Vikings, they all converge here, drawn by the promise of knowledge and prosperity. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you that your first priority is sustenance. You stumble upon a bustling marketplace, a sensory overload of sights, smells, and sounds. Mountains of dates and figs glisten in the sun, alongside sacks overflowing with fragrant spices like saffron and cardamom. You haggle with a vendor for a handful of dates and a flask of water, savoring the sweet relief as the juice trickles down your parched throat. Just try not to think about the unsanitary conditions. Historians still argue whether the remarkable urban planning of Baghdad truly improved public health, or just made it easier to collect taxes. Now fed and watered, you begin your quest, to visit the legendary House of Wisdom, the Beit al-Hikmah. This is no ordinary library, it's a thriving research center, a magnet for the greatest minds of the era. You ask for directions, navigating through the maze of streets, past grand mosques and opulent palaces. Finally, you arrive at a modest building, its entrance unassuming. But as you step inside, you enter a world of intellectual ferment. Scholars from all corners of the empire pore over ancient texts, translating them from Greek, Persian, and Sanskrit into Arabic. The air buzzes with lively debate, as mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers challenge established dogma. You observe a group of scholars huddled around a table, meticulously studying the works of Euclid, the Greek father of geometry. Another group is dissecting medical texts by Galen, seeking to understand the complexities of the human body. This is where they translated and preserved countless ancient texts, saving them from being lost to history. Talk about essential workers. You learn that the House of Wisdom is more than just a translation center, it's a hub for original research. You watch an astronomer meticulously charting the movements of the stars, using an astrolabe to calculate their positions. A mathematician is hunched over a scroll, scribbling complex equations, perhaps inspired by the groundbreaking work of Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, which is probably why you still have nightmares about X and Y. Speaking of al-Khwarizmi, he wasn't just crunching numbers, he's credited with introducing the concept of zero to the Western world, which is, like, a pretty big deal. Before that, imagine trying to do your taxes with Roman numerals. You'd be begging for the sweet release of dysentery. Al-Khwarizmi also pioneered the development of algorithms, those step-by-step procedures that are the foundation of modern computing. So, the next time you binge-watch cat videos on your phone, remember to thank a 9th century mathematician. Venturing deeper into the House of Wisdom, you find yourself in the medical wing. Here, physicians are not only studying ancient texts but also conducting their own experiments. You watch in fascination as a surgeon meticulously cleans a wound, using antiseptics derived from herbs and spices. You learn about the pioneering work of Al-Razi, also known as Rhazes in the West, who meticulously documented his clinical observations, distinguishing between smallpox and measles, a game-changer when everything was just the plague. Al-Razi was a bit of a character, too. Legend has it that when he was tasked with choosing the site for a new hospital in Baghdad, he hung pieces of meat in different locations and chose the spot where the meat rotted the slowest. A bit unorthodox, maybe. But hey, at least he was thinking about sanitation. Beyond medicine and mathematics, you discover Baghdad's fascination with the natural world. You observe a scholar carefully dissecting a plant, meticulously documenting its properties and potential medicinal uses. Another is studying animals, compiling a comprehensive encyclopedia of zoology. While not exactly the same as watching nature documentaries, these early naturalists were laying the foundation for future scientific discoveries. Now, you probably think Baghdad was all serious scholarship and groundbreaking research, right? Well, think again. The city also had a thriving entertainment scene. Storytellers captivated audiences with tales of adventure and romance, while musicians filled the air with enchanting melodies. And let's not forget the legendary 1001 Nights, a collection of folk tales that originated in Baghdad, featuring characters like Aladdin and Ali Baba. Just imagine if Disney had to actually negotiate with 9th century Baghdad to buy the rights to those stories. But it wasn't all fairy tales and pleasant melodies. Baghdad had its dark side, too. Political intrigue was rife, and power struggles within the Abbasid court were common. Assassinations, conspiracies, and backstabbing were all part of the game. You probably wouldn't want to trust anyone too easily. Historians still debate the true extent of political corruption during the Abbasid Caliphate. But one thing's for sure, it wasn't a democracy. You continue to explore Baghdad, discovering hidden courtyards, bustling workshops, and serene gardens. You see artisans crafting intricate mosaics, weaving luxurious carpets, and forging exquisite swords. The city is a testament to human ingenuity and creativity, a melting pot of cultures and ideas. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the city, you find yourself atop a minaret, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis below. The air is filled with the call to prayer, a melodic reminder of the city's deep-rooted faith. As the day ends, you realize you have only scratched the surface of this magnificent city. Baghdad in the Golden Age was a place of unparalleled intellectual and cultural achievement, a beacon of knowledge that illuminated the world. And it did it all without Instagram. Imagine the selfies you could take, probably with a camel filter. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's embark on a little journey back in time. Get comfy, maybe grab a cup of something warm, because we're about to explore the sensation that was, and is, paper. I know, paper. Sounds boring, right? Like, oh boy, another history lesson about paper. But trust me, it's way more interesting than you think. I mean, how else would you doodle aimlessly during those excruciatingly long meetings? Imagine, if you will, a world without it. A world where knowledge is primarily passed down orally, a world reliant on things like parchment, made from animal skin, lovely, right? Or papyrus, which was all the rage in ancient Egypt. Now, parchment's alright, sturdy and all, but expensive. Think of all those sheep having bad fur days. Papyrus, on the other hand, was more affordable but also kind of fragile. You could practically sneeze on it and watch it crumble into oblivion. Then comes paper. Oh, glorious paper. It's about to change everything, and you are gonna be right there for the transformation. You're in Baghdad. It's the 8th century. The city is a bustling hub of intellectual activity, a vibrant melting pot of cultures and ideas, kind of like that one really cool coffee shop in your neighborhood, except, 1,000 times bigger and with more camels. Scholars are trading wisdom, poets are crafting verses, and scientists are, sciencing. This is the Abbasid Caliphate, and its rulers are seriously into learning. They're sponsoring translations of ancient Greek and Roman texts, preserving knowledge from centuries past. Knowledge that might have been lost forever without their patronage. But writing all this stuff down on parchment is a real pain. And also, kind of smelly, honestly. You've ever been around parchment makers? That is not a scent profile you will find in a high-end candle store. So, the calligraphers are straining their wrists, the scholars are sighing with existential dread, and the librarians are running out of storage space. They are just wishing something, anything, would come along to make their lives easier. And then it arrives. You see a caravan snaking its way through the city gates, laden with mysterious bundles. These aren't spices, or silks, or even those weird little ceramic cats that everyone seems to collect. Seriously, what is with those things? These are sheets. Thin, pliable, almost impossibly smooth sheets. Sheets made from, wait for it, plants *. This is paper, my friend. And it's about to blow your mind, and the minds of everyone around you. It all started in China, a few centuries earlier. A court official named Kai Luan is generally credited with standardizing the process, although some historians think he may have just refined existing techniques. Historians still argue whether he was a lone genius or just the guy who got the patent. But regardless, the secret of papermaking had been closely guarded for centuries. Until now. The story goes that during a battle in Central Asia, Arab forces captured some Chinese papermakers. Or maybe they were just skilled artisans who decided to share their knowledge for a hefty reward. No one is really certain. Either way, the secret's out, and it's spreading like wildfire. You can see the process if you want. You're ushered into a workshop, and the scene is surprisingly earthy. It smells of damp wood and something faintly floral, like that time you accidentally left a bouquet in the sink for a week. Workers are stripping bark from trees, mostly mulberry trees, which turns out, make excellent paper pulp. You watch as they soak the bark, pound it into a mushy pulp, and then mix it with water. They dip large, rectangular screens into the vats of pulp, carefully lifting them out to create a thin layer of fibers. The water drains away, leaving behind a delicate mat. Then the sheets are laid out to dry in the sun, and you can see the papermakers stacking the sheets. It's a lot like making pancakes, if pancakes were also a key component of civilization. Once dry, the sheets are sized with starch to make them less absorbent, and then burnished to a smooth finish. The entire process is surprisingly labor-intensive, but the result is nothing short of miraculous. You run your fingers over a sheet of freshly made paper. It's light, smooth, and surprisingly strong. Imagine what you could do with this. Finally, a way to record knowledge quickly, efficiently, and relatively cheaply. No more painstakingly scratching away at parchment with a quill. No more worrying about your precious scrolls crumbling to dust. Immediately, you see that the impact of this new material is enormous. Scribes practically weep with joy. Books become more accessible, libraries flourish, and knowledge spreads like, wildfire in a dry field. Scholars can now copy and share their work with unprecedented ease. Scientific discoveries are documented and disseminated, fueling further innovation. The arts blossom, with new forms of calligraphy and illumination emerging. Paper mills spring up all over the Islamic world, from Samarkand to Damascus to Cairo. Baghdad becomes a major center of papermaking, with its mills churning out reams of paper to feed the insatiable appetite for knowledge. The city transforms into a hub of intellectual exchange, attracting scholars from far and wide. They come to study, to teach, to debate, and to contribute to the growing body of knowledge. One particularly interesting detail, you notice, is the development of bookbinding techniques. With paper being so much thinner and lighter than parchment, new ways of assembling and protecting books are needed. Skilled artisans begin crafting intricate covers, often adorned with leather, gold, and precious stones. Books become not just vessels of knowledge, but also works of art in their own right. The best example may well be those super swanky Qurans they're churning out. You see the scribes working at a furious pace, copying texts both old and new. They're translating Greek philosophical works, preserving ancient Persian epics, and documenting the latest scientific discoveries. They are working to make the works of Galen available to everyone. The House of Wisdom, a renowned library and translation center in Baghdad, becomes a beacon of intellectual activity, attracting scholars from diverse backgrounds. Historians still argue whether the adoption of paper was the single most important factor in the Islamic Golden Age, but it's hard to deny its significance. It's as if a dam has burst, unleashing a flood of knowledge and creativity. The Islamic world becomes a leading center of learning, making invaluable contributions to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. But there's more to it than just practical benefits. Paper also fosters a new culture of reading and writing. With books becoming more accessible, literacy rates rise, and more people have the opportunity to engage with ideas. Poetry flourishes, and new literary forms emerge. You're noticing the rise of popular storytelling and entertainment. People are sharing stories, engaging in debates, and challenging established ideas. Imagine that. Of course, not everyone is thrilled about this. Some conservative religious figures worry that the spread of knowledge will undermine traditional values. They view the new ideas with suspicion, fearing that they will lead to heresy and social unrest. It is kind of like that one uncle at Thanksgiving that brings up conspiracy theories about the birds. There are also concerns about the cost of paper. While it's cheaper than parchment, it's still not exactly free. Some worry that only the wealthy will have access to books, creating a knowledge gap between the elite and the common people. There are some that think that paper is going to be nothing more than a fad. However, despite these concerns, the momentum is unstoppable. Paper continues to spread throughout the Islamic world, transforming the way people communicate, learn, and think. And from there, it will spread further, eventually reaching Europe and revolutionizing the printing industry, and eventually, leading to the invention of cat videos. You watch as a group of scholars gather in a courtyard, poring over a newly copied manuscript. They're debating the finer points of Aristotle's philosophy, exchanging ideas, and challenging each other's assumptions. You can practically feel the energy in the air, the excitement of discovery. You realize that paper isn't just a writing material. It's a catalyst for change, a tool for progress, and a symbol of human ingenuity. It's a reminder that knowledge is power, and that the free exchange of ideas can transform the world. A lot of people were saying, "Okay boomer," back then, which is weird. So, the next time you pick up a book, or jot down a note on a piece of paper, take a moment to appreciate the long and fascinating history behind this seemingly simple material. And remember the scholars, scribes, and artisans who helped to bring paper to the world. They're heroes, really. Alright, settle in, almost there. Comfy? Good. Now, imagine. You're sweltering. Like, seriously sweltering. You're wearing layers of rough spun wool, even though it's hotter than, well, hotter than my attempt to bake a soufflé. You trudge through the dusty streets of Baghdad, the sun beating down with the fiery intensity of 1,000 disapproving mothers. The air hangs thick and heavy, smelling of dates, spices, and something vaguely animalistic. Yep. That's Baghdad. But you're not just wandering aimlessly, are you? No. You're on a quest. A quest for knowledge. A noble endeavor, even if your sweat is currently forming a small personal ecosystem in your armpits. Your destination. The House of Wisdom. You finally reach it. It's not a single, grand building like you might expect. More like a sprawling complex, courtyards, libraries, scriptoria, all interconnected like a very studious ant farm. The architectural style is, well, it's intricate. Arches abound, adorned with calligraphy so elaborate it makes your eyeballs do a little dance. You step inside, and the temperature drops several degrees. Ah, blessed relief! You find yourself in a bustling courtyard. Scholars, scribes, and translators are milling about, arguing, often loudly, in various languages. You hear Arabic, of course, but also Persian, Greek, Syriac, even whispers of Sanskrit. It's like a medieval academic mixer, but with less awkward small talk and more intense debates about the nature of the cosmos. Now, this house of wisdom, or Beit al-Hikmah, if you want to impress your friends, it wasn't just some fancy library. It was a powerhouse of intellectual activity, a vibrant hub where knowledge from all corners of the known world converged. Think of it as the Google of the 9th century, except instead of cat videos, they were obsessed with Aristotle and algebra. Which, arguably, is far more impressive. You notice a group huddled around a table, poring over a text. You sidle closer, pretending to be fascinated by a nearby potted palm, which, admittedly, is quite a nice palm. They're translating. Translating. That was the House of Wisdom's bread and butter. Ancient Greek texts, Persian medical treatises, Indian mathematical works, all being painstakingly rendered into Arabic. This translation movement was absolutely crucial. It preserved and disseminated knowledge that might have otherwise been lost to the ravages of time. Without it, we might not have access to the works of Plato, Aristotle, or Euclid today. Seriously, imagine a world without Euclid. Geometry would be a free-for-all. Total chaos. And who was calling the shots at this intellectual playground? That would be the Abbasid caliphs, particularly Harun al-Rashid and his son, al-Ma'mun. These guys were serious patrons of the arts and sciences. They understood that knowledge was power, and they were determined to make Baghdad the intellectual capital of the world. Talk about a smart investment. I mean, sure, building a giant palace is cool, but building a center of learning that lasts for centuries? That's next-level vision. Fun fact, al-Ma'mun supposedly had a dream where Aristotle appeared to him and explained the secrets of the universe. Now, historians still argue whether this dream was a genuine spiritual experience, a clever piece of political propaganda, or just the result of eating too much spiced lamb before bed. But whatever the reason, it certainly fueled his commitment to the House of Wisdom. I mean, who am I to judge? I once made several questionable life choices based on the advice of a talking toaster oven in a fever dream. No regrets. Mostly. You see a scribe meticulously copying a manuscript. His brow is furrowed in concentration, his hand moving with incredible speed and precision. The pages are made of parchment, smooth and creamy, and the ink is a rich, deep black. Each letter is carefully formed, a miniature work of art in itself. You can practically smell the dedication. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. You learn that the House of Wisdom wasn't just about translation. It was also a center for original research. Scholars were making groundbreaking discoveries in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and other fields. Al-Khwarizmi, for instance, developed algebra. Yes, that algebra. The one that still haunts your nightmares from high school. You should actually be grateful to him. Think about all of the structures and calculations that have been facilitated by algebra. Although, I am sorry for the flashbacks. And then there's Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. This guy was a polymath extraordinaire. He wrote the Canon of Medicine, which became a standard medical textbook for centuries. Centuries. That's like the ancient version of Gray's Anatomy, only with more leeches and fewer love triangles. Although, knowing medieval medicine, there probably were love triangles involving leeches. You never know. Historians still argue whether the House of Wisdom was a formal institution with a clearly defined structure, or more of a loose network of scholars and libraries. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. It was a dynamic, evolving entity, shaped by the personalities and priorities of its patrons and scholars. You wander into another courtyard, and this one is filled with astronomical instruments. Astrolabes, quadrants, armillary spheres, all gleaming in the sunlight. These were the tools of the trade for medieval astronomers, who were meticulously mapping the stars and planets. They were trying to understand the cosmos, to unravel the mysteries of the universe. And they did so with remarkable accuracy, considering they didn't have telescopes or supercomputers. You spot a scholar peering through an astrolabe, making precise measurements of the position of a star. His face is alight with concentration. You can see the passion in his eyes, the burning desire to understand the workings of the heavens. And then you hear it. A giggle. A soft, feminine giggle. You turn around, and you see a woman, hidden behind a stack of scrolls. Now, this is interesting. The House of Wisdom was primarily a male domain, but there were a few women who managed to break through the barriers and make their mark. One example is Maryam al-Astrolabiya, an astronomer and instrument maker who lived in 10th century Aleppo. She was known for her expertise in designing and building astrolabes. Now, that's a seriously cool job title. Al-Astrolabiya. Sounds like a superhero name. You learn that not all the scholars at the House of Wisdom were devout religious figures. Some were actually quite unorthodox. There were rumors of secret societies, forbidden knowledge, and experiments that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. You know, the usual academic shenanigans. One fringe theory proposes that the House of Wisdom even dabbled in alchemy, seeking to transmute base metals into gold and discover the elixir of life. While no gold was ever produced, the study of alchemy facilitated the beginning of the science that we now know as chemistry. You spend hours exploring the House of Wisdom, soaking in the atmosphere of intellectual curiosity and scholarly debate. You realize that this wasn't just a place of learning, it was a crucible of ideas, a melting pot of cultures, a testament to the power of human ingenuity. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. In 1258, Baghdad was sacked by the Mongol hordes. The House of Wisdom was destroyed, its libraries burned, its scholars scattered. It was a devastating blow to the intellectual life of the Islamic world. There are accounts that describe the Tigris River running black with ink from the destroyed texts. The Mongols, though fierce warriors, didn't value intellectual pursuits in the same way as the Abbasids. It was a tragic loss of knowledge and culture. But the legacy of the House of Wisdom lives on. Its contributions to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and other fields continue to shape our world today. It stands as a reminder of the importance of preserving and promoting knowledge, and of the power of cross-cultural exchange. Before you leave the ruins of the House of Wisdom, you spot a small, unassuming stone tablet. You brush away the dust, and you see an inscription in Arabic, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave." You smile. That's a motto you can get behind. Even if it means sweating through multiple layers of wool. I hope that was enough of an adventure for you. This has been a long day of travels, so I think I'm going to close my eyes for a moment. But I promise I'll be back with another story soon. Okay, come closer, friend. Let's dim the lights a little more, soften the focus, there, perfect. Just settle in, let your shoulders relax, and let's float back in time together. We're headed towards a period of incredible intellectual blossoming, a golden age, really. Think shimmering silks, bustling marketplaces filled with exotic spices, and the quiet rustle of parchment as scholars hunched over their desks, unlocking secrets of the universe. You're strolling through the vibrant, sun-drenched streets of Baghdad, maybe. The air is thick with the scent of dates, cardamom, and something faintly, goat why. Yeah, definitely goat. Around you, the sounds of bartering, the rhythmic clang of metal from a blacksmith's forge, and the melodic call to prayer echo off the intricately carved buildings. You feel the warm press of bodies as you navigate the crowd. Merchants hawk their wares, scholars debate in shaded courtyards, and children chase stray cats through the labyrinthine alleyways. It's a sensory overload, isn't it? But take a deep breath, ground yourself. We're here for a reason. We're here to witness something extraordinary. Because while Europe was, shall we say, rediscovering the joys of literacy after a bit of a Roman hangover, the Islamic world was blazing ahead. Baghdad, in particular, was the intellectual hub. Imagine a giant, swirling vortex of knowledge, drawing in the brightest minds from across continents. We're talking mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, you name it, they were studying it. And they weren't just regurgitating old ideas, they were building upon them, innovating, creating entirely new frameworks for understanding the world. And at the heart of it all, really, was this seemingly simple, utterly profound invention, the decimal system. Now, you might be thinking, decimal system? Yawn. We use that every day. What's the big deal? But trust me, before the decimal system, calculations were a nightmare. Imagine trying to do long division with Roman numerals. Seriously, try it. I dare you. You'll be pulling your hair out in no time. You'd probably end up resorting to counting on your fingers and toes, which, while charming, isn't exactly conducive to advanced scientific inquiry. The decimal system, with its elegant place value and that all-important placeholder, 0, revolutionized everything. It allowed for accurate accounting, complex astronomical calculations, and, well, pretty much anything that involved numbers. It was like switching from trying to sculpt with rocks to sculpting with clay. Suddenly, the possibilities were endless. And Islamic scholars, building upon earlier Indian concepts, were at the forefront of this mathematical revolution. It's not an exaggeration to say that the decimal system laid the foundation for modern science and technology. So next time you're balancing your checkbook, or, more likely, staring blankly at your online banking app, take a moment to appreciate the genius of those early mathematicians. They saved you a lot of headaches. Now, speaking of headaches. I'm sure you've heard of this Al-Khwarizmi guy, right? Ring a bell? Probably not. But I bet you've heard of algebra. Yep, that's his baby. Or, well, one of his babies. He didn't literally give birth to it, although that would be a very interesting historical anecdote. Al-Khwarizmi was a polymath, a true Renaissance man centuries before the Renaissance. He was a mathematician, astronomer, and geographer, a scholar who seemed to have a finger in every pie. But his most enduring legacy is, without a doubt, his work on algebra. His book, Kitab Algebra wa al-Muqabala, the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing, is considered the foundational text of algebra. Algebra, meaning restoration or completion, refers to the process of adding the same quantity to both sides of an equation to eliminate negative terms. Al-Muqabala, meaning balancing or reduction, refers to the process of subtracting equal quantities from both sides to simplify the equation. Essentially, he laid out the basic principles of manipulating equations to solve for unknown quantities. Before Al-Khwarizmi, solving equations was more like an art form than a science. He brought rigor and system to the process, transforming it into a powerful tool for solving problems. Now, before you start picturing Al-Khwarizmi as some sort of solitary genius, locked away in his tower, scribbling equations on parchment, it's important to remember that he was part of a vibrant intellectual community. He worked at the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a renowned center of learning that attracted scholars from all over the world. Imagine the conversations, the debates, the sheer intellectual energy that must have filled those halls. It must have been absolutely electric. You can picture them now, huddled around a table littered with scrolls and instruments, arguing about the best way to solve a particular problem. They might be disagreeing, shouting even, in a scholarly, polite kind of way, of course. But at the end of the day, they were all driven by a shared passion for knowledge and a desire to understand the universe. And their contributions weren't limited to abstract theory. They had practical applications too. Algebra was used for surveying land, calculating taxes, designing irrigation systems, and even determining inheritance laws. It was a tool for solving real-world problems, making life easier and more efficient for everyone. Which reminds me of this joke: algebra class is important, it teaches you how to solve problems that you will never ever have. So, Al-Khwarizmi didn't just invent algebra in a vacuum. His work, and the work of his colleagues, was deeply rooted in the practical needs of society. They were problem solvers, innovators, and pioneers. They took existing knowledge, built upon it, and transformed it into something entirely new. But here's where it gets a little fuzzy, and where historians still argue whether Al-Khwarizmi was truly the father of algebra, or merely the best expositor of existing ideas. Some argue that elements of algebra can be traced back to ancient Babylonian and Greek mathematics. They point to the work of Diophantus, a Greek mathematician who lived in the 3rd century AD, whose Arithmetica contains many algebraic concepts. These historians argue that Al-Khwarizmi simply systematized and popularized existing knowledge, rather than inventing algebra from scratch. Others maintain that Al-Khwarizmi's approach was fundamentally different, that he introduced new concepts and methods that were not present in earlier works. They emphasize his focus on solving equations using general rules and algorithms, rather than relying on specific examples. The debate continues to this day, with scholars poring over ancient texts, trying to unravel the complex history of algebra. Regardless of who gets the ultimate credit, one thing is clear: the Islamic world played a crucial role in the development and transmission of algebra. Without the work of Al-Khwarizmi and his contemporaries, algebra might never have become the powerful tool that it is today. And that, my friend, is something to marvel at. And it's not just algebra and the decimal system. Islamic scholars made significant contributions to trigonometry, geometry, and number theory. They developed new methods for solving equations, calculating angles, and measuring distances. They even made advancements in the field of combinatorics, the study of counting and arranging objects. Basically, if it involved numbers, they were all over it. And their influence extended far beyond the Islamic world. Their works were translated into Latin and other languages, eventually making their way to Europe. European scholars eagerly devoured these texts, building upon the knowledge contained within them. The Islamic world served as a bridge, preserving and transmitting ancient knowledge while simultaneously making groundbreaking discoveries of their own. Think about it: without the decimal system and algebra, we wouldn't have calculus, physics, engineering, or computer science. We wouldn't have iPhones, skyscrapers, or space travel. The innovations of Islamic scholars laid the groundwork for the modern world. And you get to live in it. Just take a second to appreciate that. And, while we're at it, let's appreciate this little-known historical fact. Did you know that some historians believe that Al-Khwarizmi's name is the origin for the word algorithm? Apparently, medieval Latin scholars, struggling to pronounce Al-Khwarizmi, started referring to mathematical procedures as algoritmus. Over time, that evolved into the modern word algorithm, which is now used to describe any step-by-step process for solving a problem. So, the next time you're arguing with a computer algorithm, remember that you're actually arguing with a distant descendant of Al-Khwarizmi. Talk about a legacy. So as you drift off tonight, friend, think of these figures, these groundbreaking thinkers. Think of the bustling marketplaces of Baghdad, the quiet rustle of parchment, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Remember their contributions, and appreciate the world they helped to create. And remember, even the most complex concepts can be broken down into simple steps, just like Al-Khwarizmi taught us. And you? You can use this knowledge to unlock your own potential, to solve your own problems, and to make your own mark on the world. And if you get stuck, just remember this joke: why was math class always so long? Because the teacher kept going off on tangents. Okay, 2 jokes instead of 3. Maybe I just wanted to tell you one more thing. Sleep tight, and sweet dreams. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's drift off into a cosmic reverie, Baghdad style. Imagine it, you're not scrolling through TikTok, but instead, you're standing on a rooftop in 9th century Baghdad. The air is thick with the scent of dates and spices, a gentle breeze whispers through the palm trees, and the sky, oh, the sky is an absolute masterpiece. No light pollution here, just a velvety black canvas sprinkled with diamonds, more stars than you could possibly count. You pull your shawl tighter around you, evenings can get surprisingly chilly even in this desert metropolis. In your hand, you hold a hefty astrolabe, cool metal against your skin. It's a complex instrument, all gleaming brass circles and intricate markings, far more sophisticated than your smartphone, even if it can't play Candy Crush. This astrolabe isn't just a pretty trinket, though. It's a key, a portal to understanding the cosmos and navigating the world. You adjust the alidade, the sighting rule, and peer through the pinholes, trying to align it with that particularly bright star, maybe it's Sirius or perhaps even Aldebaran. And you are not alone. All around you, other figures huddle, murmuring calculations and scribbling in notebooks. These are the scholars of the House of Wisdom, the intellectual powerhouse of the Abbasid Caliphate. They are the inheritors of ancient knowledge, from the Greeks, the Persians, and the Indians, and they are building upon it, refining it, pushing the boundaries of what's known. The Caliph al-Ma'mun himself, a true patron of learning, encouraged all of this, although, truthfully, sometimes you suspect he just wanted to know the most auspicious time to launch his next military campaign. You're trying to figure out the precise time for prayer. And also, frankly, to impress a certain astronomer with your stellar knowledge, pun absolutely intended. You see, beyond the religious observances, the astronomers and mathematicians here were driven by a profound curiosity, a desire to understand the workings of the universe. They weren't just stargazers, they were meticulous observers, painstakingly recording the positions of celestial bodies, tracking their movements, and searching for patterns. One particularly ambitious scholar, al-Battani, even managed to refine Ptolemy's calculations of the length of the solar year with incredible accuracy. And, even better, his writing style was apparently super dry, so great bedtime reading if you need it. But it wasn't all serious calculations and philosophical musings. You overhear snippets of gossip about a rather eccentric astronomer who believes he can predict the future based on the alignment of the planets. Some scholars scoff, others cautiously seek his advice before investing in new trade ventures. You know, it's funny, even with all this science, people still crave a little mystical reassurance. Historians still argue whether the rise of astrology during this period was a reflection of a deeper societal unease or simply a widespread fascination with the unknown. You know, I personally find astrology to be a load of bunk. But then again, maybe that's just my Aquarius moon talking. Now, back to our trusty astrolabe. It's not just for telling time or casting horoscopes, mind you. It's a portable model of the universe, projecting the celestial sphere onto a flat disk. It allows you to determine the altitude of stars, calculate the time of sunrise and sunset, and even find your latitude. Imagine being on a long journey across the vast desert, guided only by the stars. The astrolabe becomes your lifeline, your connection to the familiar patterns of the heavens. Navigation, of course, was crucial for both trade and military expeditions. Baghdad, at the heart of the Silk Road, was a bustling hub of commerce, and merchants needed reliable ways to navigate the seas and the deserts. But the astrolabe wasn't the only tool they used. They also relied on detailed maps, often incorporating information from different cultures and traditions. These maps, painstakingly drawn by hand, were not always perfectly accurate by modern standards, but they represented a significant advancement in cartography. And the accuracy was still great, considering the only way you could get information was by actually traveling somewhere, you know. No Google Earth back then. One intriguing, though perhaps slightly embellished, tale tells of a Baghdad navigator who supposedly used a giant magnet to steer his ship towards a hidden island filled with untold riches. Whether this is a fanciful legend or a hint of early understanding of magnetism is a matter of debate, but it certainly sparks the imagination, doesn't it? And it is totally true that around this time, the Arabs were experimenting with rudimentary compasses, floating needles on water, although it would still take a while before they became widely adopted. Meanwhile, you are fiddling with your own astrolabe, trying to remember the correct procedure for calculating the Qibla, the direction of Mecca. You consult your notes, filled with diagrams and annotations in elegant Arabic script. It's harder than it looks, this cosmic cartography. You briefly consider just asking that knowledgeable astronomer over there for help, but pride gets in the way. You will conquer this astrolabe if it kills you. These astronomers weren't just confined to practical applications. They also grappled with fundamental questions about the nature of the universe. They debated whether the Earth was the center of everything, as Ptolemy had proposed, or whether the Sun was the true center, a radical idea that wouldn't gain widespread acceptance in Europe for centuries. Some scholars, like al-Biruni, even speculated about the possibility of the Earth rotating on its axis, a concept that challenged the prevailing worldview. These were audacious ideas, conceived in the heart of Baghdad, nurtured by a spirit of intellectual curiosity and a willingness to question established authorities. There were also those who dedicated themselves to building astronomical observatories, massive structures equipped with sophisticated instruments for measuring the positions of stars and planets with ever greater precision. These observatories were not just places of scientific research, they were also centers of learning, attracting scholars from all over the world. Imagine the thrill of peering through a massive quadrant, carefully calibrated to capture the faintest glimmer of starlight. No Netflix and chill, just pure, unadulterated astronomical observation. But let's not romanticize things too much. Life as an astronomer in 9th century Baghdad wasn't always glamorous. You could spend hours under the scorching sun or freezing nights, squinting through instruments, battling fatigue, and dealing with the occasional bureaucratic headache. The caliph might be a generous patron, but he also expected results, and if you didn't deliver, well, let's just say your funding might mysteriously disappear. It was not unlike applying for grants today, really. And there were rivalries, of course. Intense competition for recognition and prestige could lead to bitter disputes and accusations of plagiarism. You see, even in the pursuit of knowledge, human nature prevails. Though it is widely accepted that scholarly pursuit is a noble endeavor, it can be hard to ignore the competition it also creates. You finally manage to get a decent reading on your astrolabe. Eureka! The Qibla is calculated, and you feel a surge of satisfaction. Maybe you'll even impress that astronomer after all. As you pack up your instruments, you glance up at the night sky one last time. The stars seem a little brighter now, a little closer. You feel a sense of connection to the generations of astronomers who have gazed upon these same stars, pondering the mysteries of the cosmos. But it is not just the vastness of space that captivates you. It's also the ingenuity and perseverance of the scholars of Baghdad, who, with their astrolabes, their maps, and their unwavering curiosity, helped to shape our understanding of the universe. You feel tired, but also exhilarated. The world outside may seem loud and chaotic, but here, under the watchful gaze of the stars, you find a sense of peace and perspective. You can't help but marvel at how, even after centuries, the legacy of Baghdad's astronomers continues to shine, a beacon of intellectual curiosity and a testament to the enduring power of human knowledge. Also, all this stargazing is giving you the munchies. Maybe you'll swing by the souk later and grab some baklava. Stargazing builds an appetite, you know. And hey, speaking of appetite, you really should be getting to bed, friend. All that celestial navigation can be tiring, even if it's just in your imagination. The universe will still be there in the morning, waiting to be explored. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and drift off to sleep under the watchful gaze of those distant stars. Maybe tonight, you'll dream of flying through the cosmos, guided by the wisdom of Baghdad. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's dive into the fascinating world of medicine and pharmacology, back in the day. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh boy, leeches and questionable hygiene practices. Sounds riveting. But trust me, there's actually some pretty interesting stuff happening, even if it doesn't involve popping bubble wrap. I mean, it might, but that's probably just me projecting my current desires. You find yourself in a dimly lit apothecary, the air thick with the scent of dried herbs, something vaguely resembling cat urine, and the faintest whiff of something that could possibly be a poisonous mushroom. A kindly, but slightly disheveled apothecary, peers at you over his spectacles. You're here because you've got well, let's just say you're not feeling your best. Maybe you've got the sniffles, maybe you've got something a little more historical. He shuffles behind a counter cluttered with jars and beakers, each labeled with cryptic symbols and Latin phrases you're pretty sure he just made up. He pulls out a mortar and pestle, starts grinding something that looks suspiciously like tree bark. For your ailment, he intones, I prescribe tree bark. He gives you a wink that is either reassuring or deeply unsettling. You're not quite sure which. Now, mainstream historical fact time. You might be thinking, wow, tree bark, so original. But get this, salicylic acid, a key ingredient in aspirin, was originally derived from willow bark. See? They were onto something. Albeit, something they probably also used to treat a hangnail and demonic possession. Speaking of demonic possession, let's get a little quirky. Back in the day, if you were acting a little off, shall we say, some folks believed that drilling a hole in your skull, a practice called trepanation, would release evil spirits. And get this, archaeologists have found skulls that show evidence of successful trepanation, meaning the person lived after having a hole drilled in their head. I'm not saying it cured demonic possession, but hey, maybe it did. Or maybe they just had a really bad headache and a very, very ambitious surgeon. Historians still argue whether trepanation was a legitimate medical practice or just a really gruesome form of ancient performance art. Either way, it's definitely a conversation starter. You watch as the apothecary meticulously measures out your dose of tree bark dust. He adds a pinch of something that looks vaguely like dried beetle wings. For flavor, he explains. You eye the mixture with a mixture of suspicion and morbid curiosity. He hands you the concoction, wrapped in a piece of parchment. Take this with water, he advises, and may the humors be with you. You thank him, pay your dues, which are suspiciously high considering you just got tree bark, and head out, wondering if you should maybe just tough out your ailment. But hey, at least you learned something, right? And who knows, maybe that beetle wing-infused tree bark will actually work. Or maybe you'll hallucinate for 3 days straight. Either way, it'll be a memorable experience. Think of it as a detox of modern living. Now, let's talk about surgery. You're probably picturing something out of a horror movie, right? Blood, saws, and a distinct lack of anesthesia. Well, you wouldn't be entirely wrong. Surgery back then was an adventure. A very, very painful adventure. Imagine this, you're lying on a wooden table, surrounded by onlookers who are definitely not medical professionals. Someone's holding you down while the surgeon, who probably had a really big lunch, sharpens his instruments. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and whatever disinfectant they're using, which probably smells suspiciously like vinegar. And let me tell you, vinegar is not going to make that slice feel any better. They hand you a piece of wood to bite down on, and with a deep breath, the surgeon begins. Quick mainstream historical fact here, amputation was a surprisingly common surgery. Infections were rampant, and sometimes, the only way to save a life was to remove the infected limb. So yeah, a pretty risky business all round, not for the faint of heart, or the weak of limb, I suppose. Here's a quirky little tidbit, surgeons were often barbers. Yeah, you heard me right. The same guy who gave you a shave and a haircut might also be the one removing your appendix. Talk about multitasking. Although, you have to wonder if they ever accidentally mixed up the shaving cream with the, well, you get the picture. Historians still argue about why barbers were also surgeons. Some say it was because they already had the sharp instruments. Others say it was because they were willing to do the dirty work that other doctors wouldn't. And honestly, it's probably a bit of both. You shudder at the thought. Luckily, you're not on that table. But it does make you appreciate modern medicine a little more, doesn't it? I mean, sure, you might have to wait on hold for hours to talk to your doctor, but at least you're not being operated on by a barber with a questionable knowledge of anatomy. Now, let's move on to something a little less visceral. Let's talk about public health. Back then, public health was, well, let's just say it was a work in progress. They were definitely trying, bless their cotton socks, but they were also working with a limited understanding of germs and hygiene. Imagine a bustling city street. The air is thick with the smell of everything. Horses, garbage, unwashed bodies, you name it. People are throwing their waste out the windows, literally, and the streets are filled with, let's just call it organic material. It's basically a petri dish for disease. Mainstream historical fact, major cities were often plagued by outbreaks of diseases like cholera and typhoid. These diseases spread quickly through contaminated water and poor sanitation. The solution usually wasn't a particularly modern one, they had to physically move the sources of contamination away from populations, but it was certainly a step in the right direction. Here's a quirky little fact, some people believe that bad smells cause disease. They called it the miasma theory. Basically, if something stank, it was probably making you sick. And you know what? They weren't entirely wrong. I mean, bad smells are often associated with things like rotting garbage and sewage, which are definitely not good for your health. So they were on the right track, even if their reasoning was a little aromatic. Historians still debate whether the miasma theory actually helped improve public health. On the one hand, it led to efforts to clean up cities and remove foul odors. On the other hand, it distracted from the real cause of many diseases, which were bacteria and viruses. So it's a mixed bag, really. You pinch your nose at the thought of those stinky city streets. You're glad you live in a time when people actually understand the importance of handwashing and proper sanitation. Though, let's be honest, sometimes you still see people doing questionable things in public restrooms. But hey, at least we're not throwing our waste out the window. Most of the time, anyway. So, there you have it. A glimpse into the world of medicine and pharmacology back in the day. It was a time of great experimentation, a few successes, and a whole lot of interesting practices. But hey, they were doing their best with what they had. And, in some cases, their best was pretty darn impressive. It's certainly enough to make you appreciate all the advancements we've made in modern medicine, even if that cough syrup does taste like battery acid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I need to go wash my hands. Repeatedly. Alright, welcome back, settle in, find a comfy spot, maybe fluff your pillow a little. Today, we're diving into the surprisingly whirring, clicking, and occasionally explosive world of mechanical devices in Baghdad during its golden age. Forget the image of dusty scrolls and contemplative scholars, though there were plenty of those, too. We're talking gizmos and gadgets, the kind that would make even Tony Stark raise an eyebrow, maybe. You find yourself strolling through the bustling markets of Baghdad, the air thick with the scent of spices and dates. The sun beats down, but you're shaded by intricately carved wooden awnings. Merchants hawk their wares, and the din of the crowd is a constant hum. But amidst the usual sights and sounds, you notice something different. Tucked away in a small workshop, you see a craftsman hunched over a peculiar contraption. It's a water clock, of course, but not like any you've seen before. This isn't just a simple vessel with markings, it's a miniature mechanical theater. Little figures, powered by the steady drip of water, perform a play. A tiny sultan raises his hand in greeting, a miniature musician plucks at a lute, and a tiny mechanical bird flaps its wings. You are captivated. This is the world of automata, self-operating machines. And Baghdad was, for a time, its epicenter. These weren't just toys, though some certainly were whimsical. They represented a deep understanding of mechanics, hydraulics, and pneumatics. Now, you might be thinking, wait, I thought automata were a European thing, clockwork knights and all that? Well, surprise. The Islamic world, particularly Baghdad, was centuries ahead in this game. Think of the Banu Musa brothers, a trio of inventors from the 9th century. These guys were like the Elon Musks of their time, but instead of electric cars, they were building self-powered fountains that changed their patterns, automated water pumps, and, yes, even more elaborate automata. Their book, The Book of Ingenious Devices, is a treasure trove of designs and instructions. It's basically a medieval DIY manual, filled with diagrams that, even today, can make your head spin. You watch as the craftsman adjusts a delicate gear on his water clock. It's mesmerizing. You can almost hear the faint whisper of the gears turning, the gentle splash of water. It's soothing, isn't it? Almost like rain. Don't doze off just yet, though. There's more to see. Now, mainstream history often credits Leonardo da Vinci with designing the first humanoid robot. While Leo's sketches are undeniably impressive, the Banu Musa brothers described a programmable flute player in their book. Programmable. In the 9th century. Historians still argue whether it truly constitutes a robot in the modern sense, but the concept is undeniably there. Forget Renaissance fairs, I want to see a Baghdad Golden Age Tech Expo. Leaving the workshop, you continue your stroll, your mind buzzing with the possibilities these early mechanical marvels represent. You pass a stall selling intricately decorated oil lamps. But then you notice something else, a small, metal object that looks like a miniature grenade. Now, before you start picturing medieval warfare with proto-grenades being hurled over castle walls, let's clarify. This is likely a fire pot, an early form of incendiary device. Baghdad, being a major trading hub, had access to a variety of materials, including naphtha, a highly flammable liquid distilled from petroleum. These fire pots were filled with naphtha and other ingredients, sealed, and thrown at enemy ships or fortifications. Imagine the chaos, a sticky, burning liquid engulfing everything it touched. Not very pleasant, I know. You wrinkle your nose at the thought of the pungent smoke and the inferno that these devices would have created. Definitely not ASMR friendly. Speaking of things you might find unsettling, here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some historians believe that early forms of automatic doors were used in Baghdad palaces. Not the kind with sensors that slide open effortlessly, of course. We're talking about elaborate hydraulic systems, possibly activated by changes in water pressure or even the weight of someone stepping on a certain spot. Imagine the dramatic effect of massive doors silently opening as you approach the royal presence. A bit intimidating, perhaps. Gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, "open sesame," doesn't it? You step into a library, seeking respite from the heat. The air is cool and still, filled with the scent of old parchment. Rows upon rows of books line the shelves, a testament to Baghdad's intellectual vibrancy. It was during this period that the House of Wisdom, a major intellectual center, flourished, attracting scholars from all over the world. This was where knowledge from ancient Greece, Persia, and India was translated, preserved, and built upon. Baghdad became a hub of learning, where new ideas were debated, refined, and disseminated. They were, in a sense, building a new operating system for civilization. You run your fingers along the spine of a leather-bound book, feeling the weight of history in your hands. This isn't just a collection of stories, it's a repository of knowledge, a testament to the intellectual curiosity of the scholars who lived here centuries ago. But, of course, even in the golden age of Baghdad, not everything was sunshine and roses, or should I say, dates and figs. One mainstream historical fact that sometimes gets overlooked is the social stratification. These amazing mechanical devices, these incredible libraries and the wealth they represent, it wasn't equally distributed. While Baghdad was a center of innovation and learning, it was also a society with significant inequalities. The vast majority of the population likely lived lives far removed from the luxury and intellectual pursuits of the elite. Just something to consider, you know. Now, for a light joke. Why did the mechanical bird never get lost? Because it had a built-in GPS, a gear positioning system. I apologize for that. I'm sure it's been used before. Back to the marvels though. Let's think about musical automata for a second. Imagine a mechanical orchestra, playing complex melodies without human intervention. The Banu Musa brothers designed and built such devices. They used cleverly designed water-powered mechanisms to control the movement of levers and valves, which in turn played different instruments. While no complete working model survives, descriptions of their designs are detailed enough to suggest that they were quite sophisticated. One description speaks of a tree filled with mechanical birds that sang different tunes. It was a kind of a prototype of a very complex music box. You leave the library, feeling inspired by the ingenuity of Baghdad's scholars and inventors. You pass by a perfumer's shop and are enveloped in a cloud of fragrant oils and incense. The scents mingle in the air, creating a heady aroma. It makes you think, what if they had scented automata? Imagine a mechanical peacock that not only displays its beautiful plumage, but also emits a delicate fragrance. Now that would be something. Speaking of peacocks, here's another quirky fact: there is some fringe speculation amongst certain history buffs, and I use that term loosely, that some of these automata might have been used for espionage. Imagine a mechanical messenger carrying a coded message, or a self-propelled device designed to spy on enemy movements. While there's no concrete evidence to support this, the sheer ingenuity and complexity of these devices make it a tantalizing possibility. Though it does sound a little bit far-fetched. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the city, you reflect on your journey through Baghdad's mechanical wonderland. You've seen water clocks that are also miniature theaters, fiery grenades, and hints of mechanical orchestras and maybe, just maybe, automated spy devices. You've glimpsed the brilliance of the Banu Musa brothers and the intellectual vibrancy of the House of Wisdom. And that brings us to a big open debate: to what extent did the mechanical innovations of Baghdad influence later developments in Europe? Historians still argue whether there was a direct transfer of knowledge or if similar ideas arose independently in different parts of the world. Some argue that the Islamic world served as a crucial bridge, preserving and transmitting ancient Greek knowledge to Europe, while others emphasize the unique contributions of European inventors. The truth, as always, is likely a complex interplay of both. As you prepare to leave, you have one last encounter. You spot a small child playing with a toy. It's a simple spinning top, but something catches your eye. The top is decorated with intricate geometric patterns. As it spins, the patterns blur together, creating a mesmerizing effect. It's a simple toy, yes, but it's also a reminder of the beauty and ingenuity that can be found even in the most ordinary of objects. It also makes you realize just how much work went into everything, from water clocks to spinning tops. Just like us building on the work of past YouTubers, they were building on each other's and on their predecessors' inventions. And while it might seem like ancient history, their ingenuity continues to inspire even today. One last light joke before we drift off, and a bit of a dark one, sorry. Why did the automaton break up with the robot? Because there was no spark. Well, that's all for today, folks. I hope you found that journey through the mechanics of Baghdad as fascinating as I did. Sweet dreams. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk water. Not the kind you're probably sipping on right now, though hydration is key. No, we're diving deep, metaphorically, of course, unless you've got a spare submersible handy. We're talking about water management. Think of it as the ultimate Tetris game, but with H2O. And, unlike that dusty old game console, this one has kept civilizations alive for millennia. You trudge across a sun-baked field, the soil cracking under your boots. The air shimmers with heat, the kind that makes mirages of distant water sources dance on the horizon. This, my friend, is where the magic of water management truly shines. Without it, you'd just be standing in a very dry, very uncomfortable place. But with it? Well, with it, you get food, prosperity, maybe even a decent-sized swimming pool. It all starts with getting the water where it needs to be. Let's rewind a few millennia. Imagine yourself in ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are your lifelines, but they're also temperamental. Floods one day, droughts the next. How do you manage such fickle resources? You build canals. Miles and miles of them, snaking across the landscape, delivering precious water to your fields. You're not just a farmer, you're a budding hydraulic engineer. Fun fact, the Mesopotamians were so obsessed with water management, some historians credit their downfall to poorly maintained irrigation systems leading to salinization of the soil. Talk about a watery grave, eh? Historians still argue whether the collapse of Mesopotamian societies was solely due to environmental factors, but there's no doubt that water mismanagement played a significant role. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some archaeologists believe that the Mesopotamians even used bitumen, a natural asphalt, to waterproof their canals. Talk about old-school sealant. You're using the same stuff they pave roads with to keep your crops alive. It's like the ultimate upcycle. Fast forward to ancient Egypt, another water-dependent civilization. The Nile River is their everything. It's their highway, their source of food, their raison d'etre. But the Nile floods annually, predictably, almost religiously. And what do you do with all that water? You build dikes and canals, of course, but you also invent the shaduf, a simple but ingenious device for lifting water from the river to irrigate higher ground. It's basically a seesaw with a bucket on one end, but it's revolutionary. You're feeling those biceps working out now, right? All that manual labor, but you're also feeding your family and contributing to the glory of the pharaoh. And speaking of pharaohs, it is rumored that some Egyptian leaders would even test the waters of the Nile themselves, literally. By wading into the river and declaring it clean and pure, they were sending a message to their people that the water supply was safe and blessed. You might call it the world's first celebrity endorsement deal, except the celebrity also ruled the land. Now, you might be thinking, okay, canals and buckets, got it. What's so innovative about that? Well, consider the Roman aqueducts. These aren't just ditches in the ground, they are architectural marvels, feats of engineering that still impress people today. You're channeling water over vast distances, sometimes across valleys and over mountains, using nothing but gravity and a deep understanding of hydraulics. It's like the world's most epic water slide, for cities. Mainstream historical fact, Roman aqueducts supplied not only drinking water, but also powered mills and flushed sewers. It was a complete water management system. Historians still argue whether the Romans fully understood the health benefits of clean water or if they just liked the aesthetics of fountains and public baths. Maybe it was a little of both. And here's your quirky fact, the Romans were so proud of their aqueducts that they often depicted them on coins and pottery. It's like putting a picture of your local sewage treatment plant on a dollar bill. Though, arguably, a functioning sewage system is more valuable than any currency. And while the idea of putting sewage treatment plants on money might seem unappealing, the importance of water infrastructure cannot be overstated. You see, water management isn't just about getting water to a place, it's also about getting it away. And that brings us to sanitation. You're walking through a bustling Roman city. The streets are crowded, the smells are pungent. Without a proper sewage system, things would get messy very quickly. But the Romans, with their advanced engineering skills, built elaborate networks of sewers to carry waste away from the city, keeping disease at bay. Now, skip ahead a few centuries. You're in the Middle Ages. Sanitation isn't exactly a top priority. People are tossing their waste out the windows, the streets are, well, you can imagine. But even in the midst of all this squalor, some people are starting to think about water management. Monks, in particular, are known for their sophisticated water systems, using ponds and canals to manage water for their monasteries. Monks, always quietly working, even in water management. Here's an open scholarly debate: to what extent did the monastic orders preserve ancient Roman knowledge of water management during the Dark Ages? Some argue that they were crucial in keeping these techniques alive, while others believe that the monastic contribution was more limited. Either way, they certainly played a role in shaping water management practices in Europe. Here's a quirky little fact for you: medieval castles often had elaborate systems of moats and drawbridges, not just for defense, but also for water management. The moats could be used to store water for drinking or irrigation, and the drawbridges could be raised or lowered to control the flow of water. So, your humble castle, a water-saving, enemy-repellent paradise. But things are changing again. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. Cities are growing rapidly, and water demand is skyrocketing. You're in a bustling 19th century city, and the water is flowing, but it's often contaminated. Cholera outbreaks are common, and people are dying left and right. Something has to be done. Enter the sanitary engineers. These are the unsung heroes of the modern age. They're designing and building complex water treatment plants and sewage systems, saving countless lives in the process. Your mainstream historical fact, the Great Stink of London in 1858, caused by raw sewage in the Thames, prompted the construction of the city's modern sewer system. Talk about a wake-up call. And the quirky fact. Some early sanitation engineers believed that diseases were caused by miasma, bad air. They thought that if they could just get rid of the smell, they could get rid of the disease. While their understanding of germ theory was lacking, their focus on ventilation and sanitation did help improve public health. Historians still argue whether the focus on sanitation was driven more by public health concerns or by economic considerations. After all, sick workers aren't very productive. Either way, the result was a significant improvement in public health. And that brings us to today. You're in a modern city, turning on the tap without a second thought. But behind that simple act lies a complex system of reservoirs, pipelines, treatment plants, and distribution networks. Water is being pumped, filtered, disinfected, and delivered to your home, all thanks to the ongoing efforts of water managers. But here's the thing, water is a finite resource. And as the population grows and climate change intensifies, water scarcity is becoming an increasingly pressing issue. You may even be considering if you should stop that shower that's lasting a little too long. We need to find new and innovative ways to manage our water resources. That means investing in water-efficient technologies, promoting water conservation, and finding ways to reuse and recycle water. You need to think about how you're washing your car, what kind of sprinkler you're using, and if you really need that 10th ornamental fountain in your backyard. Here's a quirky thought for you. Did you know that some companies are now experimenting with using treated wastewater to brew beer? It's called toilet to tap, and while the idea might sound a little unappetizing, the beer is supposedly quite good. That's some serious upcycling. Historians still argue what will be the most efficient solution to water scarcity: large-scale infrastructure projects, like desalination plants, or smaller-scale, decentralized solutions, like rainwater harvesting. Maybe the answer lies in a combination of both. Because, in the end, water management is not just about engineering, it's about sustainability. It's about ensuring that future generations have access to this precious resource. So, the next time you turn on the tap, take a moment to appreciate the complex system that makes it all possible. And maybe, just maybe, think about taking a slightly shorter shower. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go grab a glass of, you guessed it, water. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's get comfortable. Imagine, if you will, you're swaddled in the softest, most luxurious, well, anything, really. A cloud? A kitten made of cashmere? Your favorite worn-out t-shirt? Whatever brings you bliss, embrace it. Because we're about to embark on a journey through the fascinating world of textiles and dyeing, and trust me, it's far more captivating than it sounds. You find yourself stepping into a vibrant marketplace, maybe somewhere in ancient Egypt. The air hums with the sounds of bartering, the scent of spices, and the ever-present aroma of, well, let's just say ancient sanitation practices weren't always top-notch. But your eyes are drawn to the kaleidoscope of colors spilling from stalls overflowing with fabrics. Linen, of course, the king of Egyptian textiles, cool and crisp against the desert heat. You run your fingers over a bolt of brilliantly dyed cloth, a deep, almost royal blue. Indigo, perhaps. Or maybe woad. The exact methods, you realize, are closely guarded secrets, passed down through generations of artisans. It was serious business. Trade secrets, you know. Like the Colonel's secret recipe, but for fabric. You might be thinking, linen? Seriously? Sounds kind of boring. But hold on. Think about the process. The flax plant, cultivated for centuries, the fibers carefully extracted, spun, and then woven. It's a laborious process, demanding patience and skill. It's definitely not a throwaway culture like we have today with fast fashion. And the finished product? Well, it adorned everyone from pharaohs to farmers, each according to their station. In fact, linen was so valued that it was even used as currency. Can you imagine paying for your groceries with a bolt of fabric? That'll be 2 loaves of bread and a pound of dates, please. Here, have some high-count Egyptian flax. And speaking of pharaohs, they took their linen seriously. Apparently, some pharaohs even insisted on being buried in multiple layers of linen shrouds, allegedly for protection against the afterlife's elements. Or maybe it was just a really intense case of wanting to be comfortable for eternity. One of history's more obscure facts, the ancient Egyptians were really good at making linen. I mean, really good. Historians still argue whether the quality of ancient Egyptian linen was due to superior flax varieties, advanced weaving techniques, or some combination of the two. Or maybe they just had really good water for soaking the fibers. Who knows? Now, let's teleport ourselves to ancient China. Silk. The very word conjures images of luxury, elegance, and power. You can almost feel the smooth, shimmering fabric sliding through your fingers. But where does it come from? Tiny silkworms, munching away on mulberry leaves, spinning their cocoons of pure, unadulterated silk. It's a labor of love, or at least a labor of insect biology. The Chinese guarded the secrets of silk production for centuries, and rightly so. It was a valuable commodity, traded along the Silk Road, connecting east and west. You almost feel bad for the silkworms though. Like, they spend their whole lives making fancy clothing for humans. Do they even get a say in the matter? Imagine the scene, a Roman senator draped in luxurious silk robes, acquired at great expense, impressing his colleagues with his wealth and status. Little does he know, the fabric he's wearing represents a complex network of trade, diplomacy, and, well, silkworm husbandry. It's kind of like wearing a walking, talking international relations statement. Silk was so prized that it was often worth its weight in gold. That's some seriously expensive pajamas. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Legend has it that the secret of silk production was smuggled out of China hidden in the hair of a princess who was marrying a foreign prince. Talk about a high-stakes hair appointment. Historians still argue whether this legend is based on fact or simply a romanticized tale. Maybe it was hidden in her bustle. Maybe the prince wanted a silk wig. Maybe they just really liked carrying around silkworms. The world may never know. Let's move on to the vibrant world of dyeing. Forget the drab, beige existence you might be imagining. We're talking about vibrant reds from madder root, deep blues from indigo, yellows from saffron. Nature itself was a giant dye pot, just waiting to be tapped. And let me tell you, the techniques were anything but simple. Mordants, those mysterious substances that help the dye bind to the fabric, were often made from things like urine, animal dung, or even rusty metal. Yum! Talk about dedication to your craft. You have to admire the sheer ingenuity of these early dyers, experimenting with different ingredients and techniques to achieve the perfect shade. Consider the color purple. Back in ancient times, purple dye was extracted from a specific type of sea snail, and the process was so laborious that it was reserved for royalty and the extremely wealthy. Hence the term royal purple. Imagine having to squeeze thousands of tiny sea snails just to dye one tunic. Talk about a tedious job. Okay everyone, we need to squeeze 1,000 more snails before lunchtime or the king is going to be angry. And bring me another snack. Snail squeezing is tough work. It makes you appreciate modern synthetic dyes, doesn't it? You know, there are tales of ancient dye recipes being so closely guarded that they were passed down only through specific families, often kept secret from outsiders. Some dyeing families might even use coded language to describe their processes, just in case some nosy neighbor tried to eavesdrop. It's like a secret handshake, but for fabric. Can you imagine a family of dyers, gathered around a cauldron, chanting cryptic instructions in a low murmur? Add 3 pinches of dragon's breath, stir counterclockwise beneath the light of the full moon, and speak the sacred words. I am joking, of course, mostly. And here's a fun fact for you: some ancient dyes were actually believed to have medicinal properties. Red dyes, for example, were thought to promote healing and ward off evil spirits. So, basically, wearing a red shirt could protect you from, well, who knows what, but it sounded good at the time. It's like a wearable good luck charm. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were based on actual medicinal properties or simply wishful thinking. Maybe wearing red just made people feel more confident, which in turn boosted their immune system. Or maybe the red dye was made from some plant with hidden healing powers. It's the mystery that keeps things interesting. Think about the evolution of textile production. From hand spinning and weaving to the invention of the spinning wheel and the power loom, each technological advancement brought about significant changes in society. The Industrial Revolution, in particular, revolutionized textile production, leading to mass production and the availability of affordable fabrics for the masses. But it also came at a cost, with the rise of factory labor and the exploitation of workers. It's a reminder that progress is never without its complexities. Let's not forget the impact of textile trade on global economies. The cotton trade, for instance, played a significant role in the rise of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. The demand for cotton fueled the expansion of plantations in the Americas, relying on the forced labor of enslaved Africans. It's a dark chapter in history, and one that we must never forget. Here's something you might find interesting. Some historians argue that the invention of the sewing machine contributed to the rise of ready-to-wear clothing and the decline of custom tailoring. So, basically, the sewing machine democratized fashion, making it accessible to more people. But it also put a lot of tailors out of business. Such is progress. But wait, there's more. Did you know that there's a whole field of study dedicated to the analysis of ancient textiles? Textile archaeology. These experts use scientific techniques to identify fibers, dyes, and weaving patterns, providing valuable insights into the lives and cultures of past civilizations. It's like CSI, but for clothing. Imagine uncovering a fragment of fabric and being able to reconstruct the entire garment, revealing the wearer's social status, occupation, and even their personal preferences. So, the next time you slip into your favorite pair of jeans or wrap yourself in a cozy blanket, take a moment to appreciate the long and fascinating history of textiles and dyeing. From the humble flax plant to the intricate patterns of silk brocade, these materials have shaped our world in countless ways. And remember, even the simplest piece of fabric tells a story of human ingenuity, creativity, and our enduring connection to the natural world. Sweet dreams. Alright, settle in, friend. Maybe grab a lukewarm cup of chamomile tea. We're diving into the shimmer and sparkle of glassmaking and ceramics. You're trudging through the sands of time, feeling the gritty particles between your toes. It's hotter than you expected. Did anyone pack sunscreen for our archaeological adventure? Of course not. That's alright, we'll just imagine we're glowing from within thanks to all the silica we're about to absorb. Look around. This isn't just any beach, it's a hypothetical one, somewhere in the ancient Near East, maybe even ancient Egypt around 3500 BCE. You see someone carefully raking a pile of what looks like sand. But wait. There's natron involved. Natron, that naturally occurring sodium carbonate stuff, key to mummification, but also, a crucial ingredient in early glassmaking. See, they weren't just preparing pharaohs for the afterlife, they were accidentally inventing the stuff that'd eventually let you binge-watch cat videos on a flat screen. Ah, the irony. You watch the ancient artisan mix the sand and natron, adding a touch of lime for stability. Think of it as the rebar in their silica skyscraper. Then, into the rudimentary furnace it goes. The heat is intense, even from here. This isn't your grandma's kiln, mind you. We're talking a roaring fire, stoked with all the intensity they could muster. Getting the temperature just right was a delicate dance, a dance that often ended with a puddle of useless slag. You know, like that pottery class you took. Remember? The one where your art resembled more of a deformed blob. Yeah, we won't talk about it. The earliest glass wasn't clear, mind you. It was often opaque, deeply colored, blues and greens predominating, thanks to the presence of trace elements like copper and cobalt. These colors were prized, mimicking the hues of precious stones like lapis lazuli and turquoise. It wasn't just functional, it was a status symbol. Imagine rocking up to a party with a glass bead necklace back then. You'd be like the Beyoncé of the Bronze Age. Now, they weren't exactly making window panes at this point. Think beads, amulets, small vessels. The techniques were still rudimentary. One popular method was core forming, creating a core of clay around a metal rod, dipping it into molten glass, and then decorating it with trails of different colored glass, painstakingly applied. After cooling, the clay core was scraped away, leaving behind a hollow glass vessel. Tedious work, but somebody had to do it, right? And those somebodies were likely highly skilled artisans, probably treated with a respect we barely afford our baristas today. Speaking of meticulous work, you should see the Minoans over on Crete. They were masters of faience, a self-glazing ceramic material. They were creating intricate figurines and vessels with vibrant colors, centuries before the Romans even thought about indoor plumbing. Historians still argue whether faience should be considered a type of glass or a type of ceramic, or something entirely different. It's like trying to decide if a tomato is a fruit or a vegetable. The legal system has an opinion, but does that opinion actually matter? Now, let's fast forward a few centuries. You find yourself in 1st century Rome. Ah, the eternal city. You're breathing in the smells of, well, let's just say the Romans weren't known for their impeccable sanitation. But amidst the less than pleasant aromas, something beautiful is happening, glassblowing. The invention of the blowpipe, somewhere around the 1st century BCE, revolutionized glassmaking. Suddenly, instead of painstakingly layering glass, you could inflate a molten blob of it into all sorts of shapes. It was like going from making sandcastles with your hands to having a high-powered water cannon. Imagine the possibilities. And the speed. Mass production became a reality. Suddenly, glass vessels weren't just for the elite. Commoners could afford glass cups, bowls, and even window panes. Okay, maybe not huge window panes, but definitely small ones. Tiny, adorable, bourgeoisie window panes. You watch a Roman glassblower at work. He dips his blowpipe into the molten glass, gathers just the right amount, and then, puff asterisk. The glass expands, taking shape under his breath. He twirls it, shapes it with tongs, and then, with a final flourish, detaches it from the blowpipe. The whole process takes only a few minutes. It's mesmerizing. You think, wow, that's way easier than that pottery class. Still not gonna mention it. Roman glass wasn't just clear, it was also colored, often with deep blues, greens, and purples. They even figured out how to make dichroic glass, which changes color depending on the angle of light. It's like the mood ring of the ancient world, only way cooler. They also experimented with techniques like millefiori, creating intricate patterns by fusing together different colored glass rods. Seriously, these guys were the rock stars of ancient glassmaking. They knew all the chords, played the solos, and definitely smashed a few instruments backstage. Mainstream fact time, Rome's expansion actually relied heavily on their ability to produce glass. Glass became a commonplace object, rather than a luxury item, so it could be used across the empire. Now, let's not forget about ceramics. While glass was having its moment in the sun, ceramics were continuing to evolve. Potters were experimenting with different clays, different firing techniques, and different glazes. You see them creating everything from simple storage jars to elaborate decorated vases. Pottery was truly the backbone of ancient civilization. I mean, how else would you store your wine and olive oil? In a plastic container? Don't be ridiculous. And speaking of ridiculous, ever heard of the legend of the Philosopher's Stone? You know, the thing that supposedly turns base metals into gold and grants immortality? Well, some alchemists believe that the secret to making the Philosopher's Stone lay in understanding the properties of, wait for it, ceramics. Specifically, the crucible, the ceramic vessel used to melt and transform materials. They thought that by mastering the crucible, they could unlock the secrets of the universe. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But hey, you can't fault them for trying, right? Plus, all their failures lead to some delicious new ways to prepare food and keep it fresh. Now you're whisked away again, this time to medieval Europe. Think drafty castles, muddy streets, and the ever-present threat of something unpleasant. But even in the midst of all that medieval squalor, artistic endeavors thrived. Stained glass windows began gracing cathedrals across Europe, transforming dull sunlight into a kaleidoscope of color. It was a religious experience, literally. Imagine walking into a cathedral bathed in the ethereal glow of stained glass. It's enough to make anyone believe in something, even if it's just the power of well-crafted artistry. The process of making stained glass was painstaking. First, the glassmakers would create sheets of colored glass by adding metallic oxides to the molten mixture. Then, they would cut the glass into the desired shapes and arrange them into a design. Finally, they would paint details onto the glass using a special enamel paint, and then fire the glass to fuse the paint permanently. All those tiny pieces of glass held together with lead came to life in one giant, beautiful piece. Historians still argue whether stained glass should be considered primarily a form of painting or a form of glassmaking. It's a bit of both, really. But one thing is certain, it's a stunning example of how art and craft can come together to create something truly transcendent. It's like that time you tried to bake a cake and accidentally created a masterpiece. Except, you know, on a much grander scale. Ceramics in the Middle Ages also saw significant advancements. Potters developed new glazes, new firing techniques, and new decorative styles. Medieval pottery might not be as flashy as Roman glass or as awe-inspiring as stained glass, but it was practical, durable, and often quite beautiful in its own way. Plus, without it, where would you keep your mead? Seriously, think about it. Here's your quirky tidbit: some medieval alchemists believed that certain types of pottery could be used to detect poison. They thought that if you poured poisoned wine into a special ceramic cup, the cup would either crack or change color, alerting you to the danger. Of course, there's no scientific evidence to support this claim, but it makes for a pretty good story, doesn't it? Though, if someone offers you wine from a cracked cup, maybe just politely decline. It's probably not the wine you need to be worried about anyway. And as our quicksand tour draws to a close, take a moment to appreciate the skill, ingenuity, and artistry that went into creating these beautiful objects. They're more than just glass and clay. They are the tangible remnants of human creativity, reaching across the centuries. They are reminders that even in the midst of hardship and uncertainty, people have always found ways to express themselves, to create beauty, and to leave their mark on the world. Now, wasn't that relaxing? Zzzzzzz. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let the anxieties of the 21st century just melt away. Imagine yourself stepping through a shimmering portal, leaving behind the cacophony of notifications and deadlines. You find yourself not in some sterile, futuristic laboratory, but in the vibrant, bustling heart of Baghdad. Specifically, you're entering a perfumer's workshop, circa the 9th century. The air itself is thick with the promise of floral extravagance, earthy depths, and a touch of, well, you'll find out. You trudge through the narrow, winding alleyways, past merchants hawking silks and spices, the cries of children echoing off the mud brick walls. The sun beats down, but the high walls offer welcome shade. You notice the intricate geometric patterns adorning doorways, a testament to the mathematical precision that underpinned so much of the era's art and science. It was a golden age, after all, a period where intellectual curiosity flourished, preserved, and expanded upon the knowledge of the ancient world. Mainstream historical fact, check. The air suddenly shifts, becoming richer, more intoxicating. You pause, inhaling deeply. Frankincense, myrrh, rosewater, jasmine, the scents mingle and dance, hinting at secrets waiting to be unlocked. And there. A small, unassuming door tucked between a baker's stall and a spice merchant. A simple sign hangs above, Dar al-Itr, the House of Fragrance. You step inside. Immediately, the scene unfolds. Alchemists, artisans of scent, and perhaps even a few early chemists, are moving with purpose. Some are hunched over alembic stills, carefully monitoring the distillation process, their brows furrowed in concentration. Others are meticulously grinding raw materials with pestle and mortar, releasing potent aromas into the already saturated air. And you thought your aromatherapy diffuser was fancy. Copper pots bubble gently over charcoal braziers, releasing steam that carries the very essence of roses, oranges, and sandalwood. Huge ceramic vats hold macerating flowers, steeping in fragrant oils, patiently surrendering their souls. It's a sensory overload, a symphony of scents that simultaneously grounds and elevates. You notice one artisan carefully decanting a clear liquid from a glass flask. He holds it up to the light, admiring its golden hue. This, you understand, is the purest essence of rose, painstakingly extracted and concentrated. Rosewater, in this era, wasn't just a pleasant addition to your face toner, because, let's face it, you're probably using rosewater toner. It was a potent medicinal ingredient, a key component in perfumes, and even a flavoring for delicate pastries. They put that stuff in everything. It's fascinating, really. They were essentially performing early forms of chemical extraction, albeit driven by the desire for exquisite perfumes rather than, say, developing new pharmaceuticals. You wonder, not for the first time, if the line between science and art is as clear as we often assume. The scents themselves seem to murmur in agreement. You stifle a sneeze, the potency of the aromas catching you off guard. Over in a corner, a group of artisans are mixing pigments and binders, creating vibrant hues for cosmetics. Crushed minerals, plant extracts, and even, gulp, insects are being combined to create rouge for cheeks, kohl for eyes, and henna for hair. The colors are astonishing, from deep ruby reds to shimmering emerald greens. You watch as one artist meticulously grinds malachite, a copper carbonate mineral, into a fine powder, then mixes it with a binding agent to create a dazzling green eyeshadow. Talk about commitment to beauty. The process is painstaking, requiring a deep understanding of the properties of each ingredient. It's also not without its risks. Some of the pigments used, like lead-based white lead, were highly toxic. Beauty, as they say, could come at a cost. Hopefully, they had a decent health insurance plan. Just kidding. They definitely didn't. While the upper classes certainly indulged in elaborate cosmetics, historians still argue whether the use of makeup extended widely throughout society. Some believe it was primarily a marker of status and wealth, while others argue that it was a more common practice, employed by women of all social classes to enhance their natural beauty and express their personal style. Whatever the truth, it's clear that the pursuit of beauty was a significant aspect of life in Baghdad. You follow your nose, drawn by a particularly intriguing scent. It leads you to a small, secluded chamber where a master perfumer is at work. He's an older man, his face etched with years of experience, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. He's surrounded by an array of bottles and jars, each containing a carefully crafted blend of fragrant oils, resins, and spices. He beckons you closer, his voice a low, soothing rumble. He explains that perfume making is not merely a craft, it's an art, a science, and a form of alchemy. He speaks of the importance of balance, harmony, and the power of scent to evoke emotions, memories, and even spiritual states. He seems very serious about all this, like he's trying to give you deep life advice. He picks up a small crystal vial, its contents a shimmering amber liquid. This, he whispers, is oud, the wood of the gods. It's derived from the resinous heartwood of the agarwood tree, and it's one of the most expensive and prized ingredients in perfumery. He explains that the process of extracting and preparing oud is incredibly complex, requiring years of expertise. Apparently, the trees only produce this fragrant resin when infected with a particular type of mold. Kind of gross, but also fascinating. It's like the fungal equivalent of a pearl. He dabs a tiny amount of the oud on your wrist. The scent is unlike anything you've ever experienced, deep, smoky, and animalistic, yet also strangely comforting and grounding. It lingers on your skin, a constant reminder of this extraordinary place and time. You can totally see why people are so obsessed with this stuff. You ask him about the secrets of his craft, and he smiles knowingly. He explains that the key is not just the ingredients themselves, but the proportions in which they are combined. He talks about the importance of top notes, heart notes, and base notes, the delicate interplay of scents that creates a harmonious and long-lasting fragrance. He then divulges something truly remarkable: the development of distillation, crucial to modern perfumery and chemistry, is attributed to Jabir ibn Hayyan, Jibr, a prominent alchemist living in the 8th and 9th centuries. He didn't just discover new chemicals, he designed and described sophisticated lab equipment, including the alembic, which is still used today, albeit with a few modern upgrades. Who knew perfume had such a scientific backbone? He shows you a beautifully illustrated manuscript, filled with recipes and formulas for various perfumes and cosmetics. The script is elegant and flowing, the diagrams precise and detailed. This, he explains, is a closely guarded secret, passed down through generations of perfumers. He points to a particular recipe, one that calls for rare and exotic ingredients like ambergris, a substance produced by sperm whales, quirky tidbit alert, musk, derived from deer, yikes, and saffron, the world's most expensive spice. These ingredients, he explains, are not just added for their scent, but also for their supposed medicinal and aphrodisiac properties. You raise an eyebrow. Suddenly, the whole perfume as art thing is starting to sound a little suspect. He catches your expression and chuckles. Do not underestimate the power of scent, he says. It can influence the mind, the body, and even the soul. You ponder this for a moment. He's right, isn't he? A whiff of freshly baked bread can transport you back to your childhood. A certain perfume can instantly remind you of a loved one. Scent is a powerful trigger, a direct line to our emotions and memories. You spend what feels like hours listening to the master perfumer, learning about the history, the science, and the art of fragrance and beauty in Baghdad. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the workshop, you realize it's time to leave. Before you depart, the perfumer presents you with a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of silk, is a tiny vial of perfume, a unique blend created especially for you. A reminder of this place, he says, and a symbol of the beauty that can be found in the most unexpected of places. You thank him profusely and step back out into the bustling streets of Baghdad. The air is cooler now, the crowds are thinner, and the sounds of the city are softer. You clutch the wooden box tightly in your hand, feeling a sense of gratitude and wonder. As you begin your journey back to the 21st century, you can't help but smile. You've just experienced a glimpse into a world of artistry, innovation, and a deep appreciation for the power of scent and beauty. And you smell amazing, by the way. That oud really suits you. Maybe you should ditch the rosewater toner and go all in on the ancient Iraqi perfume vibe. Alright, gather round, settle in. Let's dim the lights a little, shall we? Today, we're not just traveling through time, we're stepping into a kitchen. A very fancy kitchen. A kitchen that's, well, it's dripping with saffron and rosewater. We're heading back to 9th century Baghdad to explore the culinary innovations and refined gastronomy of the Abbasid Caliphate. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of spices, a symphony of aromas swirling around you like a benevolent genie escaping a very fragrant lamp. You're not just smelling cumin, you're smelling freshly toasted cumin, expertly ground and blended with something intriguing. Possibly something involving pistachios. You can almost taste it, can't you? The possibilities are endless, truly. And incredibly appetizing. You trudge through the bustling marketplace, the cacophony of hawkers vying for your attention, a gentle hum in the background. You pass stalls overflowing with dates, plump, glistening jewels of the desert, pomegranates bursting with ruby red seeds, and mounds of spices that would make your modern-day spice rack weep with envy. You stop at one stall, and the merchant, sensing a potential customer, offers you a sliver of something that tastes suspiciously like marzipan but with a zing. It's made with almonds and orange blossom water. Not bad. Not bad at all. Now, before you get entirely lost in the sensory overload, let's get our bearings. The Abbasid Caliphate, at this time, was a powerhouse. We're talking about a period of immense intellectual and cultural flourishing, a golden age where Baghdad was the undisputed center of the world. You see the exchange of goods, ideas, and, of course, recipes from all corners of the empire and beyond. From India, spices and rice made their way west. From Persia, sophisticated cooking techniques and delicate flavors arrived. And from the Mediterranean, olives, citrus fruits, and seafood added their own unique notes to the culinary orchestra. You notice a group of men gathered around a scribe, meticulously copying a scroll. What are they looking at? Could it be a cookbook? Yes, indeed. Books like the Kitab al-Tabik, the Book of Dishes, meticulously documented hundreds of recipes, preserving them for posterity, and hungry modern foodies like us. Historians still argue whether these cookbooks represent the everyday fare of the average Baghdadi citizen, or if they were reserved for the elite. It's like trying to figure out if your grandmother's prized apple pie recipe was something she whipped up every Tuesday, or just for Thanksgiving. You peer over the scribe's shoulder, your eyes scanning the flowing Arabic script. You spot a recipe for sikbaj, a sweet and sour stew, a dish that was clearly a favorite among the Abbasid elite. Vinegar and honey create a tantalizing balance, while meats like lamb or beef are simmered to tender perfection. You imagine the caliph himself, reclining on silk cushions, savoring a bowl of sikbaj while discussing matters of state. That's a pretty good life, isn't it? Now, for a slightly, offbeat historical tidbit. Did you know that some culinary historians believe that the Abbasids were pioneers in the use of ice cream? Yep, you heard that right. Sort of. While it wasn't exactly the ice cream you'd find in your local grocery store, they created chilled drinks and desserts using snow brought down from the mountains and preserved in underground ice houses. Imagine the logistical nightmare of getting enough snow to make a decent batch of sorbet in the middle of the desert. Honestly, I can't even manage to keep my popsicles frozen in my modern freezer, so massive props to them. You continue your exploration, noticing the sheer variety of breads on offer. Thin, crispy flatbreads, fluffy leavened loaves, and everything in between. They're all baked in communal ovens, radiating warmth and filling the air with that irresistible, yeasty aroma. You grab a piece of Cubs, a simple flatbread, and tear off a piece, savoring its slightly smoky flavor. It's the perfect accompaniment to, well, anything, really. You could soak up a little sikbaj, or some harissa, not the North African kind, but a wheat and meat porridge. Speaking of communal ovens, here's a quirky side note: in some parts of the Abbasid world, these ovens weren't just for baking bread. They were also used for cooking eggs in interesting ways, sometimes even burying them in the hot ashes for hours. Talk about slow cooking. And let's talk about presentation. Food wasn't just about sustenance, it was about artistry. Dishes were often elaborately decorated with edible flowers, herbs, and spices. Imagine a platter of roasted poultry, adorned with sprigs of rosemary and saffron threads, shimmering under the candlelight. It was a feast for the eyes as well as the stomach. You also notice the emergence of certain dietary trends and preferences. Vegetarianism, while not widespread, was practiced by some, particularly those influenced by Sufi mysticism. You might find a humble but delicious dish of lentils and vegetables, seasoned with fragrant herbs, in a quiet corner of the marketplace. A real precursor to your veggie burgers, only a little less processed. One key ingredient that played a pivotal role in Abbasid cuisine was rice. Introduced from India, rice quickly became a staple, appearing in a multitude of dishes, from simple pilafs to elaborate stuffed vegetables. You see vendors selling different varieties, each with its own unique aroma and texture. You decide to sample a spoonful of ras mufalfal, a fragrant rice dish cooked with saffron, almonds, and raisins. The sweetness of the raisins is perfectly balanced by the earthy aroma of saffron. Now, for a light chuckle. You have to wonder, what was the 9th century equivalent of ordering takeout after a long day of conquering empires? Did they have someone deliver a steaming bowl of sikbaj on horseback? I'm imagining a very frustrated horse. Back to rice, though. It's interesting to consider how this relatively new ingredient impacted the existing culinary landscape. Historians still argue whether the introduction of rice led to the decline of other staple grains, such as barley and wheat, or if it simply expanded the culinary possibilities. The old grains didn't want to cede their place, for sure. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling marketplace, you find yourself drawn to a stall specializing in sweets. Ah, yes, the sweet stuff. This is where things get really interesting. The Abbasids were masters of confectionery, creating a dazzling array of treats using honey, dates, nuts, and spices. You see trays piled high with canned, a type of hard candy, and halwa, a dense, fudgy confection made with sesame seeds and honey. You cautiously sample a piece of lazinage, an almond paste treat infused with rosewater. The floral aroma is intoxicating. And now, a slightly more surprising fact. The Abbasids were known for their innovative use of spices, but they also weren't afraid to experiment with some, shall we say, unconventional ingredients. Some recipes even called for things like musk and ambergris. I'm not sure I'm ready to add whale secretion to my dessert, but hey, different strokes, right? Before you leave, you grab one more treat for the road, jalab, a refreshing drink made from dates, rosewater, and pine nuts. The sweetness of the dates is perfectly balanced by the floral aroma of rosewater and the crunchy texture of the pine nuts. It's the perfect ending to your culinary journey through 9th century Baghdad. You sigh contentedly, your senses overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and aromas of the Abbasid Caliphate. You've tasted the past, savored its flavors, and gained a newfound appreciation for the culinary innovations of this remarkable era. You've got rosewater on your fingers, saffron in your teeth, and a deep, abiding craving for sikbaj. And if that's not a successful time-traveling adventure, I don't know what is. I hope you enjoyed this culinary trip, and maybe even learned something along the way. Alright, settle in, get comfy. Maybe grab a cup of chamomile tea, because we're diving deep into the world of musical instruments and how they blossomed into artistic powerhouses. You find yourself surrounded by the echoes of the past, a gentle hum resonating from forgotten concert halls and workshops filled with the scent of wood and varnish. Imagine you're standing in a bustling 18th century Parisian salon. The air is thick with perfume, powdered wigs bob rhythmically, and the faint scratch of a quill pen accompanies snippets of hushed conversation. But dominating the scene is a magnificent harpsichord, its polished wood gleaming under the candlelight. You run a finger lightly across its keys, feeling the cool ivory beneath your touch. This isn't just a pretty piece of furniture, it's a portal to a world of emotion, a conduit for expressing the deepest human feelings. You can almost hear the ghostly melodies of Couperin dancing in the air. And you'd better believe that those keys were meticulously crafted. The craftsmanship involved in building these instruments was intense. We're talking months, sometimes years, of dedicated work by skilled artisans. Think about it, each piece of wood had to be carefully selected, seasoned, and shaped to precise specifications. The strings, often made of gut, had to be perfectly tensioned. The hammers, the dampers, the entire action, it was a delicate dance of physics and artistry. It's not just hitting a note, it's engineering sound itself. Try explaining that to your cat when it jumps on the piano. The harpsichord, of course, wasn't the only star of the show. You see lutes, their pear-shaped bodies gleaming invitingly. You might even spot a serpent, a rather unique-looking bass wind instrument that looks like a coiled, well, serpent. The serpent, by the way, was notoriously difficult to play in tune. One historian remarked that mastering the serpent required the embouchure of an angel and the lungs of a blacksmith. I mean, ouch. You almost feel bad for the poor musician struggling to coax a decent note out of that thing. Almost. Speaking of struggling musicians, many of these instruments were incredibly expensive. Owning a fine instrument was a status symbol, a sign of wealth and refinement. It was like having the fanciest handbag or the newest sports car of the day, but for sound. And that meant that access to high-quality musical instruments was largely limited to the aristocracy and the wealthy merchant class. Ordinary folk often had to make do with simpler, folk instruments, or perhaps a well-worn fiddle passed down through generations. But here's where things get interesting. Because even though the wealthy controlled the finest instruments, music itself became increasingly accessible to a wider audience. Public concerts became more common, and music publishing started to flourish. Suddenly, you could buy sheet music and play the latest hits in your own home, assuming, of course, you had a harpsichord and could read music. But still, it was a step in the right direction. It was like the Spotify of the 18th century, only with more powdered wigs. Now, let's move on from the salon and find ourselves in a small workshop. The air is thick with sawdust, and the scent of wood glue hangs heavy in the air. You see a craftsman hunched over a workbench, meticulously carving the soundboard of a violin. This isn't just carpentry, it's an art form. The shape, the thickness, the density of the wood, every detail is carefully considered to produce the perfect tone. It's almost meditative to watch. The violin, of course, had been around for a while, but it reached its peak during this period. The legendary Stradivari, Guarneri, and Amati families were crafting instruments that are still revered today. These violins aren't just valuable because of their age, they're valuable because of their sound. Musicians will tell you that there's a certain magic to a Stradivarius, a warmth and richness of tone that's simply unmatched. And here's a fringe fact for you. Some people believe that the secret to Stradivarius's violins lies in the wood itself. They claim that the trees used by Stradivari were grown during a period of unusually cold weather, which resulted in denser, more resonant wood. Other theories involve the varnish used by Stradivari, the minerals present in the local water supply, or even the phases of the moon during the crafting process. Historians still argue whether these factors really had a significant impact, or whether it was simply Stradivari's genius and skill that made his violins so extraordinary. Personally, I'm going with a little bit of everything, plus maybe a dash of fairy dust. Now, let's talk about the orchestra. Because during this period, the orchestra as we know it really started to take shape. Composers like Haydn and Mozart were experimenting with different combinations of instruments, developing new forms like the symphony and the concerto. It was an exciting time of innovation and experimentation. Think of it as the musical equivalent of the Renaissance, but with more oboes. You can imagine yourself sitting in a dimly lit concert hall, surrounded by elegantly dressed patrons. The conductor raises his baton, and the orchestra bursts into life. The violins soar, the cellos rumble, the trumpets blare. It's a kaleidoscope of sound, a sonic tapestry woven from emotion and skill. And you, my friend, are right there in the middle of it all. But the orchestra wasn't just about sound, it was also about power. Orchestras were often supported by wealthy patrons, and the music they performed reflected the tastes and values of the elite. Music became a tool for projecting power and prestige. It was like the soft power of the day. Which makes you think of how different music has become in the modern day. And that's a whole different subject. Back to history. It wasn't all sweetness and light, though. There were plenty of debates about what constituted good music. Some people preferred the ornate, complex style of the Baroque era, while others championed the simpler, more elegant style of the classical era. There were arguments about the role of emotion in music, about the balance between form and expression, and about the proper way to perform a given piece. It was like a giant musical food fight, only with more polite language and less actual food. Historians still argue whether these debates were really about aesthetics, or whether they were actually about social and political power. Were the champions of the classical style simply trying to overthrow the old guard of the Baroque era? Were the arguments about emotion in music really about controlling people's feelings? It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something to think about. Think about it as you're listening to your favorite pop song, wondering if it's secretly brainwashing you to buy more sneakers. As the period drew to a close, new instruments were being developed, new musical styles were emerging, and the very definition of music itself was being challenged. The seeds of the Romantic era were being sown, and the world of music was about to change forever. So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of musical instruments and their role in shaping artistic expression. From the elegant harpsichords of Parisian salons to the meticulously crafted violins of Cremona, these instruments were more than just tools, they were vessels of emotion, symbols of power, and catalysts for change. And as you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of their music fill your dreams. Perhaps you'll even hear the faint strains of a serpent, bravely struggling to stay in tune. You've earned the rest. Okay, let's dim the lights a little, settle back, and let's wander, shall we? Not through bustling marketplaces or towering ziggurats today, but into the heart of Baghdadi leisure. What did the people of this ancient, vibrant city do when they weren't, building empires or writing groundbreaking philosophical treatises? Let's find out. Imagine yourself there, the sun beating down, and you will be imagining, because unless you've invented a time machine, you're probably sitting in your air-conditioned comfort right now, lucky you. The scent of dates and spices hangs heavy in the air, and the call to prayer echoes in the distance. But beyond the daily grind, what delights await? One of the most popular pastimes, surprisingly perhaps, involved a lot of, sitting. Think of it as ancient people watching, only with more intricate rules and significantly less caffeine. This, my friend, was backgammon or something pretty darn close to it. Variations of this classic game have been unearthed from archaeological sites all over the Middle East, going all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, so you can safely assume that the good people of Baghdad were familiar with the satisfying click-clack of dice and the strategic dance of pieces across a board. You might find yourself huddled in a shaded courtyard, strategizing with friends or challenging a local expert to a game. Loser buys the dates, naturally. And before you ask, yes, Baghdadis were just as prone to cheating at backgammon as anyone else. Historians still argue about the precise origins of the game, with some claiming it arose independently in different regions, but its enduring popularity speaks volumes about its universal appeal, doesn't it? And speaking of sitting, let's not forget the importance of storytelling. Baghdad, during its golden age, was a hub of intellectual and artistic activity. Think of it as the Renaissance, but with more turbans and fewer berets. People would gather in coffee houses, not coffee houses, exactly. Tea was more the beverage du jour, in private homes, or even just under the shade of a convenient palm tree, to listen to tales spun by professional storytellers. These weren't just bedtime stories, mind you. These were epic narratives, filled with daring heroes, cunning villains, and magical creatures ripped straight from the pages of the 1001 Nights, also known as Arabian Nights. You, perhaps, might find yourself captivated by the adventures of Sinbad the Sailor, or mesmerized by the tragic love story of Layla and Majnun. Maybe even feel a little sleepy, especially if the storyteller is particularly thorough with his descriptions. Now, if sitting and listening isn't your thing, and I can't blame you if it isn't, I'm getting a little restless just thinking about it, fear not. Baghdad offered plenty of opportunities for more active pursuits. Think falconry, for instance. Imagine yourself, a hawk perched proudly on your gloved wrist, the wind whipping through your hair, or turban, depending on your sartorial choices. This wasn't just a sport, it was a status symbol, a demonstration of wealth and skill. The higher-class Baghdadis spent a lot of time and money training these magnificent birds, and showing them off to their equally wealthy and impressed friends. Historians still argue over the precise level of falconry's influence on the Baghdadi economy, because who wants to talk about the economy when you can talk about birds? But what if you were, shall we say, less hawkish? Well, there were other options available. Archery, for example, was both a practical skill, for hunting and warfare, and a recreational activity. You can picture yourself honing your aim at targets in a training ground, the satisfying thwack of the arrow hitting the bullseye. Or maybe you'd prefer a good old-fashioned game of polo, where skilled horsemen would race across a field, mallet in hand, battling for control of a small wooden ball. Of course, these activities were mainly reserved for the elite, but even the common folk could enjoy a bit of friendly competition in the form of wrestling or other athletic contests. Beyond the organized sports and pastimes, there was always the simple pleasure of music and dance. Baghdad was a melting pot of cultures, and its music reflected this diversity. You might hear the mournful strains of a lute, the rhythmic beat of a drum, or the soaring melodies of a singer accompanied by a flute. People would gather to dance and celebrate at festivals, weddings, and other special occasions. I'd wager you can find some early form of belly dancing going on as well. Don't be surprised if you get pulled onto the dance floor yourself, resistance is futile. Trust me on this. The rhythms are contagious, and the Baghdadis are exceptionally persuasive. Now, a slightly quirkier fact, the people of Baghdad were quite fond of pets. Cats, dogs, monkeys, even exotic birds, they were all popular companions. Imagine strolling through the city streets and seeing a wealthy merchant walking his pet monkey on a leash. It sounds utterly ridiculous, but it probably happened. I tell you that, and you just know somewhere out there, some historian is furiously working on a paper about the social implications of pet ownership in Abbasid Baghdad. But let's delve a little deeper, shall we? Let's talk about the more, shall we say, intellectual pursuits. Baghdad was a center of learning, a place where scholars from all over the world came to study and share their knowledge. You might find yourself in a library, poring over ancient texts, debating philosophical concepts with fellow students, or attending lectures by renowned scholars. Think of it as an ancient version of university, only with more beards and less student debt. Okay, strike that last part. Debt has probably existed since the dawn of time. Now, while these high-minded pursuits were undoubtedly important, let's not forget the simpler pleasures of life. Like food and drink. Though not too much drink, because, you know, religious reasons. You can find yourself indulging in delicious sweets, sampling exotic fruits, or enjoying a hearty meal of roasted meats and fragrant rice. And of course, no Baghdadi gathering would be complete without a plentiful supply of dates. The sweet and sticky fruit was a staple of the Baghdadi diet, and it was enjoyed by everyone, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest beggar. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dates? Really? That's the culinary highlight? Trust me, when you're in the middle of the desert, a juicy date is like ambrosia sent straight from the heavens. Let's not forget the importance of public baths, or hammams. These weren't just places to get clean, they were also social hubs, places where people could relax, gossip, and network. You might find yourself soaking in a warm pool, getting a massage, or simply chatting with friends. Think of it as a spa day, but with a slightly more communal atmosphere. It's something that is still a really important part of the culture. And here's another little-known fact for you, Baghdad was renowned for its gardens. The city was dotted with lush green spaces, filled with fragrant flowers, towering trees, and sparkling fountains. These gardens were not just places of beauty, they were also places of relaxation and contemplation. You might find yourself strolling through a garden, enjoying the peace and quiet, or simply sitting on a bench, reading a book. Of course, maintaining these gardens in the middle of the desert required a considerable amount of ingenuity and engineering. But the Baghdadis were nothing if not resourceful. Who else could create a paradise in the middle of the desert? And, as the day winds down, you might find yourself enjoying a leisurely boat ride on the Tigris River. The river was the lifeblood of Baghdad, and it provided a vital source of transportation, irrigation, and, of course, recreation. You can sit back, relax, and watch the sun set over the city, the twinkling lights reflecting on the water. Just watch out for pirates. Actually, probably no pirates. But, you know, one can never be too careful. So, as you can see, life in Baghdad wasn't all about warfare and politics. There were plenty of opportunities for leisure and recreation. From backgammon and storytelling to falconry and gardens, the people of Baghdad knew how to enjoy themselves. They worked hard, they played hard, and they created a vibrant and thriving culture that continues to fascinate us to this day. And on that note, good night. Or, as they might say in Baghdad, Tisbah al-Akhir. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's dim those lights, maybe grab a cup of chamomile tea, hold the honey. Tonight we're going deep into the heart of a civilization that whispers to us even now, centuries later. You're walking through the Baghdad of the 9th century, but it's not the dusty, war-torn image you might have in your head. Nope, this is a vibrant, bustling metropolis, overflowing with the scent of spices from the Silk Road and the gentle murmur of 100 languages. You can feel the energy thrumming beneath your sandals. The sun beats down, reflecting off the glazed turquoise tiles that adorn the House of Wisdom, or Beit al-Hikmah. It's not just a library, you see, it's a powerhouse of intellectual activity, a place where scholars from all corners of the world, Christians, Jews, Muslims, pagans, gather to translate, debate, and expand the boundaries of human knowledge. You see a gaggle of turban-clad scholars, their brows furrowed in concentration, poring over ancient Greek texts. They're meticulously copying them, preserving works by Plato and Aristotle that might otherwise have been lost to the ravages of time. Imagine that, without these guys, you might not have had your Philosophy 101 class in college. They really were the unsung heroes of the ancient world. I wonder if they got overtime. You pass by a group of mathematicians huddled around a sand-covered tablet. They're wrestling with the complexities of algebra, a system developed here in Baghdad, and it's really mind-bending stuff. Who knew numbers could be so darn complicated? They're debating the merits of using the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, which, let's be honest, is way easier to use than those clunky Roman numerals. Can you imagine trying to do your taxes with Roman numerals? Good luck with that, buddy. This system, which includes the concept of zero, a revolutionary idea at the time, is about to change everything, from trade to engineering. You might not give it a second thought when you tap in your PIN number at the ATM, but you're indirectly benefiting from the intellectual legacy of Baghdad. Further down the street, you hear the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. You peek into a workshop and see an artisan meticulously crafting an astrolabe, a complex astronomical instrument that allows sailors and travelers to navigate by the stars. It's like a medieval GPS, only way cooler. They tell you, with a sly grin, that it can also be used to calculate the precise time for prayers, which is, you know, pretty important around here. It's a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, a testament to the ingenuity and precision of Baghdad's artisans. Apparently the demand for these things was astronomical. Sorry, I had to. You notice that the streets of Baghdad are cleaner than you might expect. You are told the city boasted an advanced sanitation system, with underground sewers and a network of canals that flushed waste away from the city. You wouldn't want to be on that cleanup crew. Public hospitals, known as Bimaristans, offered free medical care to all, regardless of their social status or religious affiliation. The famous physician, Al-Razi, also known as Raises in the West, is making rounds, examining patients and prescribing medications based on careful observation in clinical trials. He's a stickler for hygiene, insisting that doctors wash their hands before examining patients, a concept that seems pretty obvious to you now, but was revolutionary back then. People flocked to Baghdad just to be treated by the best doctors in the world. Historians still argue whether Baghdad had the most progressive medical system of the medieval world. Stepping away from the main thoroughfare, you find yourself in a bustling marketplace. The air is thick with the aroma of exotic spices, perfumes, and freshly baked bread. Merchants from as far away as China and Scandinavia haggle over prices, trading goods like silk, porcelain, furs, and amber. You see a vendor selling paper, a relatively new invention that has only recently made its way to Baghdad from China. It's cheaper and easier to produce than parchment or papyrus, which means that knowledge can be disseminated more widely than ever before. Imagine trying to write a novel on a scroll of papyrus, your wrist would be killing you. Some fringe theories even suggest that the wide availability of paper contributed to the explosion of literary and scientific activity in Baghdad. The rise of paparazzi, perhaps. In a quiet corner of the market, you spot a storyteller captivating a crowd with tales of adventure, romance, and magic. He's weaving intricate narratives filled with jinns, flying carpets, and hidden treasures. You recognize some of the stories. They're from 1001 Nights, also known as the Arabian Nights, a collection of folk tales that have been passed down through generations. You realize that these stories are not just entertainment, but also a reflection of the cultural values, beliefs, and anxieties of the people of Baghdad. Historians still argue whether the Arabian Nights originated entirely in Baghdad or whether it was a compilation of stories from different cultures. But who cares? The tales are pretty magical, and that's all that matters. You stumble upon a perfumer's shop, and you are immediately hit with a wave of fragrant scents. Rosewater, jasmine, musk, ambergris, the combinations are endless and intoxicating. The perfumer, a wizened old man with twinkling eyes, tells you that he's experimenting with new techniques for extracting essential oils and creating complex perfumes. He explains the importance of scent in daily life, from masking unpleasant odors to enhancing personal beauty. He even claims that certain scents can have therapeutic properties, influencing mood and emotions. Apparently the most popular scent was Age Baghdad. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the city, you find yourself in a lush garden. Fountains gurgle, birds sing, and the air is filled with the sweet scent of flowers. It's a haven of tranquility in the midst of the bustling city. You see scholars and poets strolling through the garden, engaged in lively conversations. They're discussing philosophy, literature, and the meaning of life. This is a place where ideas can blossom and creativity can flourish. You notice someone trying to juggle apples. I hope they don't drop them. You see a man working on a complex mechanical device. It's a clock, but not just any clock. This one is powered by water and features intricate automata that move and chime at regular intervals. It's a marvel of engineering, a testament to the Baghdad's mastery of mechanics and hydraulics. It was so ahead of its time that it almost feels like something out of science fiction. It makes you wonder what other technological marvels they might have invented if their civilization hadn't been disrupted by wars and invasions. Finally, the day draws to a close. You stand on a rooftop, gazing out at the glittering cityscape of Baghdad. The air is cool and still, and the sounds of the city gradually fade away. You feel a deep sense of awe and gratitude for the intellectual and cultural legacy of this remarkable civilization. Baghdad was more than just a city, it was a beacon of knowledge, innovation, and creativity that illuminated the world for centuries. Fringe theories suggest some technologies of that period are still not fully understood. It really was the heart of the world. As you drift off to sleep, you are transported to the world of flying carpets, genies, and magic. You'll be singing a whole new world in no time. Wind down. The images of Baghdad now begin to soften, the vibrant colors fading to a gentle, muted glow. The sounds of the bustling city recede, replaced by a quiet, almost imperceptible hum, like the gentle breathing of the earth itself. You feel a sense of peace settling over you, a sense of connection to the countless souls who once walked those ancient streets. The weight of history lifts, and you are left with a feeling of wonder, a quiet appreciation for the enduring power of human ingenuity and creativity. Remember the scholars hunched over their texts, the artisans crafting their intricate instruments, the storytellers weaving their magical tales. They were all driven by a desire to learn, to create, to understand the world around them. And their legacy lives on, in the mathematics you use every day, in the stories that still captivate your imagination, in the very fabric of our civilization. Allow that sense of connection and wonder to settle deep within you, a warm and comforting presence as you drift off to sleep. Let your mind wander through the gardens of Baghdad, among the stars that guided its scholars and travelers, in dreams as sweet and fragrant as the city's finest perfumes. Sweet dreams.